Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Man, oh man, it's been an interesting couple of weeks for me. Of course, I had already announced on the channel that I'd be gone for a few days due to a business trip that I was taking. But when I got back, my daughter was absolutely sick as a dog, and I ended up having to keep her out of school all of last week. Of course, she was fine and happy as a lark by the time the weekend came, but Daddy was so exhausted that I still didn't have energy for the channel, and it's been a while since you all have seen me. I'm back now, and within a couple of days, we'll definitely get back to the live streams so we can get into Dragon Age Inquisition. Speaking of Dragon Age, I've missed a ton of information regarding Veilguard. So this video today is not only going to be about the recent gameplay drop by IGN, but it's also going to contain some information from articles that have been released and the combat overview that was released last week. With all that being said, we're going to be doing a ton of Dragon Age content on the channel, so if that interests you, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of my videos. Dragon Age Veilguard has significantly more verticality than what I was expecting. In the 22-minute preview that IGN provided, you watch the character explore some of the areas, and there's a lot of dropping down to different levels. It's clear they passed up a lot of side areas that they mentioned would have secrets and bosses and things of that nature that you would be able to explore. And all of the articles I've seen about Veilguard, they made it sound so linear, and it obviously still is. These are contained areas with specific missions, but it does seem like some real effort has been placed in exploration, at least from what we've seen thus far. And so that was kind of a pleasant surprise, and I am looking forward to walking around in some of the beautifully detailed environments that BioWare has created. One of the things I really love about a game that focuses on verticality is being able to knock enemies off of high ledges. That's something Baldur's Gate 3 did so right, and I'm really looking forward to being able to kick enemies off of ledges in Veilguard for sure. The weapons and armor continue to look absolutely fantastic. Grey Warden armor looks great, and from what we've seen released thus far, it seems like there's going to be a really nice variety of different looks that your characters can have. Your personal character can equip a helmet, armor, rings, belt, and I think they can equip a necklace as well. You cannot equip boots or greaves, so there is a little bit of a limitation compared to a standard CRPG, but overall, there seems to be a nice selection of options that you'll have in order to get specific builds. You'll also have runes that can be placed into your weapons, and it appears some of these runes will have active abilities. Multiple times during the combat presentation, the character used an ability that froze all the enemies on the screen, and it came directly from a rune on their sword. I thought that was really cool. You also have two weapon loadouts, so for a warrior you can equip a weapon and a shield, or you can also have a two-handed weapon available and you can switch between them on the fly. Really cool stuff. And it's also been announced that there's a full transmog system. Now, I'm not the type of player who's married to the look of a particular armor or weapon, but what I am passionate about is all of my party being synergized. That's one of the things I really enjoyed about Mass Effect 1, having that Colossus red and black armor on all my party members when you got to the end game. And so I think it's really cool that hopefully we could do something similar in Veilguard and make it clear all of us are on one accord. That's great stuff. And so I'm looking forward to playing around with that system. They also briefly showed some of the skill trees for Warrior, and to me it looks absolutely fantastic. A lot of different abilities that we'll be able to choose from. And there are passive abilities that interact with specific builds. So they showed a passive that extends the amount of time your weapons will stay burning. And just overall, from what I saw, it seems like there will be a ton of different build opportunities in Veilguard, considering all of the different elements, all of the different resistances and elemental weaknesses that the enemies have. the runes, the gear, the skill trees. It seems like there's a lot of different ways to put yourself together. In the combat display, they specifically focused on the build that dealt with staggering enemies and burning them. Looked really, really cool. And it's already been mentioned that there will be a free respec option in Veilguard. So it seems like you're going to be able to switch things up as you please. I have some thoughts on that. I'm not exactly fully on board, but we'll talk about that in the dislike section. Another thing that I really liked is, at least based upon the footage we've seen thus far, mages don't look constrained. There was a real concern that only having access to 3 spells would be a big deal for mages, but frankly, looking at the footage, I never felt like there was a time where the player just didn't have anything to do, or where it was like, yep, see, this is boring in this spot right here, and it's because they only have 3 abilities. Considering the 3 abilities that you have, the heavy and light attacks available with your staff, the rune ability that is available to you, and the dash ability that allows you to get out of danger, it seemed like the player was constantly running around, constantly had things that they could do to try to be effective in combat. So I don't know. I think I'm actually going to play a mage for my first run. It's already been mentioned that there will be a Spellblade specialization for Mage, and I think I'm going to go ahead and go with that because I want to run with Balara and Harding, because they already mentioned that Harding is the party member who gives you the most information regarding Solus, and I want my character to really, really know Solus as much as possible. But of course, the concern with that type of party is that there's no warrior. So I really want my mage to serve as the warrior who's jumping into the fray and drawing a bunch of the heat away from my other companions. We'll see whether or not that actually works. But thus far, based upon the footage, I don't feel like mages are going to be hamstrung by this ability limitation, even though I'm absolutely of the opinion that the old system, where we could just throw out whatever spells we wanted without having played the game, I feel like that's probably going to feel superior. But since we're on the subject of combat, I gotta be honest with you, for me, it's in the light column. Now, I know a lot of you look at how different it is from Origins, and you wish it was more like Origins, and you feel like this is such a strong departure from what you would have preferred. But me personally, as a Dragon Age fan, I already know each game is going to be completely different, and I appreciate that each game is different. I don't appreciate that a lot of these differences for Veilguard seem to be BioWare trying to make it more like Mass Effect, and we'll definitely talk about that in the dislike section. But just being straight up, this system doesn't look phoned in. It doesn't look like they just slapped something together and was like, this is what they'll do when they're in combat. It at least looks like BioWare put some real thought into how to make a system that people might be able to enjoy. Perhaps not the kind of players who enjoyed Origins combat, but more modern players, a wider audience that would enjoy being able to play in a more action-based system. I can see that they really tried to put their best foot forward. Did it work? Will this system actually be fun? We won't know until the game is in our hands, but I do respect the effort. It doesn't look like just some slop that they threw together. Also, as a longtime Dragon Age fan, I think it's super cool to see a Griffon in the game. Asan looks absolutely fantastic thus far. I'm really looking forward to petting the creature, and I'm hoping we can get more Griffins. And if my character is playing as a Grey Warden, maybe she'll be able to get a Griffin of her own. We'll see. It's also been mentioned previously that you'll be able to pause cutscenes, which, as a parent, it's something that I love. There's nothing worse than all of a sudden your kid needs something, or your kid runs into the room and it distracts you from a critical cutscene that you have no way to restart without facing some super difficult boss. So I like the fact that there are these accessibility options. I know this was a big topic of conversation when it came to Elden Ring, but obviously this is a totally different type of game. Dragon Age has never been about the challenge or the difficulty of the combat encounters, so I'm really glad that they went on ahead and gave you this option. The IGN showcase mentioned that each companion will have their own section of the Fade where they reside, and that the look of it will change over time along with whatever is happening to the companions. I think that's really cool. I love the little details they seem to be adding to make it seem like things are happening outside of the main character. So the idea that these companions, they have their own space and it's going to develop over time. They also mentioned that sometimes when party members have quests, even though they're required for that quest, they'll already be in the area you have to travel to in order to take care of that task, to give the feel of they are just as invested in this being done as you are, and they're not waiting around until you're ready to go do it. They're motivated, they're driven, and they've already started on the task before you even get there. I think all that's wonderful. Again, makes it feel more alive. Dragon Age 2 tried to do something similar where it seemed like all of them had their own lives, but the areas where you would see them didn't really develop or change all that much over the course of the game. So it had some degree of that, but could have been a little bit better. Hopefully Dragon Age Veilguard really delivers in this area. I say all that, but I do want to be clear, I'm not really sold on the whole lantern outside of their door thing. Basically, BioWare has implemented a system where if you see a lantern up in front of the door that leads it to where the companions reside, that's how you know they are ready to speak with you. That seems kind of gamey to me. I don't know. It might feel different once I'm actually in the game, but looking at the footage, it seemed kind of annoying. We'll see how it works out. And then the final thing I want to mention is, according to BioWare, again during the IGN showcase, they said that side content will feel meaningful and connected to the main quest. So they're not filling up the game with a bunch of fetch quests, supposedly. Instead, it's going to feel very purposeful. And the interesting thing about this is side content is an area that Dragon Age has always struggled in. The quest for party members was always great, but a lot of the side content, especially what you had to do for factions, in Dragon Age Origins, it was quests that you got in the beginning of the game that you couldn't finish until the end of the game. And a lot of times it was just walking up and talking to a person. It wasn't really a lot of dialogue or story involved in it. And so it just wasn't all that satisfying. It's even worse in Dragon Age 2 because a lot of times you're just picking up items that you magically know who they belong to, and then you just walk up to the person, drop it off, they give you some coins, and they say it 1 or 2 lines, and then that's it. It was absolutely terrible, clearly put in as a way for the developer to just fill up the game with some filler content because they didn't have enough time to do anything more substantial. And then in Dragon Age Inquisition, you have this game world that was filtered with MMO type repeatable quests that got really old by the time you reach the middle of the game. So the side content is something where the Dragon Age series has always seriously struggled. It'll be interesting to see if BioWare is able to come through and deliver more quality side content in Veilguard compared to previous games in the series. But I do just want to note, when they said that, hey, this side content is going to be much better, you're talking to a Grey Warden who says 1 or 2 lines about, hey, go talk to this person and let them know something, and then the conversation ends. It absolutely seemed like the beginning of a fetch quest to me. Now, obviously, in practice, maybe it's going to feel completely differently. And again, that's an area I'll definitely look at when we do a full review of the game. All right, so that's all the good stuff. That's the stuff where I looked at it and I was like, this seems interesting, makes me really excited to play it. And to be clear, overall, I am still excited to play this game. I'm really hoping from a story standpoint, a lore standpoint, a dialogue standpoint, this is going to be a game that's true to the Dragon Age series overall. That being said, there are definitely some concerns. The first one, the faces. They continue to look terrible. I mentioned this in my coverage of the gameplay footage that they released, and frankly, I think it's even worse in the IGN showcase. The faces almost universally look flat. They look unexpressive. There's little to no extra details that really help define the faces, such as scarring, tattoos, freckles, blemishes, anything that makes it seem like, hey, this is a real person. The faces, for the most part, look like putty. Again, I stick to what I said before. For whatever reason, darker faces look better. Davrin is the best looking character you see in both the combat exposition and the IGN showcase. His face looks the best, which is frankly wild to me. I've never said this about a game before, that the darkest skin looks the best. Usually it's the exact opposite. I've seen multiple outlets comparing the faces to Mass Effect Andromeda. I wouldn't go that far, all right? Mass Effect Andromeda looked like a QA problem, right? It looked like it was just so bad that you felt like you were looking at a face that was buggy constantly, right? Whereas in Veilguard, I feel like it's more so a design problem, that there hasn't been enough effort placed into making sure all of the faces look distinguishable, and so consequently it all just looks bland, and it's very, very unfortunate. Now, of course, there's the possibility that the footage they're releasing is from an older build, and when we get the full version of the game, the faces are going to be more expressive, or at the very least have a lot more defining characteristics that will distinguish some of these different people. But to be honest with you, I don't have my hopes up. I think it really just is what it is. The lip syncing, from what I saw, is also absolutely terrible. And the conversation between the Qunari and Davrin, it seemed like Davrin's lips were completely off, and that could be a major, major distraction while you're playing the game. Speaking of the Qunari, looks absolutely terrible. Terrible. Why is this face so smooth? You know what's interesting about this? So we started with Dragon Age Origins with Sten, right? And Sten had no horns, and the Qunari just looked like large humans, basically. They didn't look that different from everybody else around them. And then Dragon Age 2 blew all that out of the water and presented the Qunari as creatures who were wholly, completely different. And you can make an honest case that the Era Shock is the best villain in the entire series, right? And then Dragon Age Inquisition took that, and in my opinion, while the Qunari are still really, really cool, I don't feel like they're as visually fearsome, distinctive, and enticing as they are in Dragon Age 2. And it seems like in Dragon Age Veilguard, that trend is continuing, where slowly the Qunari are getting worse and worse and going back to the way they looked in Origins. This character looks terrible. And the crazy thing about it is, in my opinion, the Rooks that BioWare has chosen to showcase have steadily looked terrible. The best Rook we have seen is the one from the first video, because he had that dark skin, so his face didn't look like putty. They should have just ran him back and had him be the one in this showcase, because having this lighter skinned Qunari whose face looks smooth and mushy it's just not a good look. It's just not a good look at all. And I don't understand why they chose to go this route. But I mean, you can look at the comments, you can look at the coverage of it across the board. This feels like an unforced error. I don't understand how the BioWare devs cannot look at this and say, this is not a good representation of our game. And the other wild thing about this is, BioWare has been making a huge deal about their character creator. telling everybody that it's amazing, it's awesome. You've got so many things you could do, such a high level of detail. Why isn't that represented in your NPCs? My concern is that they've put a ton of effort into making this amazing character creator where you can have this awesome character, but they did not use that character creator to create their NPCs. Instead, NPCs is just a ball of putty, and then they just spin out different characters from it, like the orcs in Lord of the Rings. Like, no, this doesn't work. Like, I hate comparing this game to Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm going to be very, very careful about that in my review. I feel like Veilguard should be compared to Inquisition. It shouldn't be compared to Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think that's fair. But to compare with Baldur's Gate 3, one of the amazing things about the character creator is not just what you could do with your own character, it was the diversity in all the different people you met throughout the game. And frankly, BioWare did a pretty good job of that in Inquisition as well. The people you met did not look like putty. And so, I don't know, I'm really hoping when we get a full version of the game that some of this is going to be ironed out. Now, let's circle back to combat. Companions look awful to me. And I feel like the fears that I had regarding how this system is going to work have pretty much come to pass, and they've taken aspects of Mass Effect's combat that work just fine in Mass Effect, but in my opinion, don't work in Dragon Age. When you look at these fights, the companions are doing paltry damage. They're barely doing anything. Virtually every single enemy that Rook was going up against had to be killed by Rook, which is not the way it should work in Dragon Age. In pretty much all of the previous Dragon Ages, if you built your companions right, they were absolutely lethal in combat. And there would be situations all the time where you would turn around and see some enemy get slaughtered by one of your companions without you having to do anything. And in this game, it feels like everything is manual, that your companions spend most of their time doing extremely weak hits, waiting for you to trigger a combo, which is the only time real damage is dealt. If that's the case, it'll be extremely frustrating and extremely unfortunate. What is the point of putting in all that effort to make sure they're equipped properly and that they have certain skills that I want them to use, and making sure their build is all up to snuff, only for them to go into combat and basically do nothing unless I manually tell them to? That's what I feel when I look at this combat. You all can let me know down in the comments if you disagree, but I'm not excited about that aspect. I feel like combat is very easily going to become a grind. It's clear that even encounters that don't have big bosses, or from what I'm seeing, even big elites, can take an extended amount of time in order for you to get through it. In the high level combat showcase, it seemed like every fight, Corin was almost about to die. Like, these are not, there didn't look like there was any quick encounters like, oh, okay, these are just regular foot soldiers. Let me go ahead and snuff them out, and then I can be on my way. So if all of these combat encounters are these huge brawls, and I have to do all of the work while my party members just do ineffective attacks waiting for me to tell them to do something, that sounds like it's going to be a grind. That sounds like it's going to be something where after a while, it's just not going to be all that much fun. And the other issue I have with this is it seems like BioWare is placing a huge amount of emphasis on using a build that's crafted around the enemy you want to face, right? So they're going up against Darkspawn, and all the party members and whatnot are geared for fire damage against Darkspawn. And they're using runes and things of that nature that are geared around Darkspawn. And they've allowed you to respec freely. So my question is, if I'm a fire mage, right, and I've put together a bunch of fire stuff, and then I have party members that can interact with that, right? Like I think Davrin had an ability that extended the amount of time an enemy stayed inflamed or something of that sort, right? But then I go up against enemies who are maybe weak against ice. Are they also going to be immune against fire? Am I going to be expected to... Now, I'm fine with switching out equipment or switching out runes. Like, that's to be expected. That's fine. But am I expected to flat out respec my abilities, like the way my class works, to align with the type of enemy that I'm about to face? That could get really annoying. That could get really annoying really quickly. And I'm concerned that that's almost kind of the direction that the game is going, because it seems like BioWare is really emphasizing that, hey, you can switch around your builds and your setup pretty much at will. Like for me, my build is part of the character. Like if I'm a fire mage, I'm a fire mage. I don't switch to Ice Mage just because Ice is more effective against the character that I'm facing, right? And so for me personally, it doesn't appeal to me to switch around to different types of styles and builds based upon the enemies I'm about to face. So hopefully that's not the case. We shall see. But all the way around, even though I respect the effort, even though I respect that, okay, BioWare really put some thought into how this combat works, I'm just not sold that it's actually going to be fun. Bottom line. Bottom line. I'm not sold at all that all this running around and constantly going into the pause menu to manually tell your party members what to do, I'm not sold that it's actually going to be a fun experience in practice. I'm not sold that it's not going to be either. Right? But some of the things that I've seen personally are definitely concerning. But overall, that's my thoughts on the game. Like I said earlier, definitely still excited, definitely still planning to play it, definitely looking forward to how Solas's story is resolved, definitely looking forward to seeing if BioWare is capable of creating a quality continuation of the Dragon Age franchise. I would absolutely love to see it. Those are my thoughts. So let me know your feedback down in the comments. Hope all of you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.